Hello everyone. In the first proper video on the channel I would like to both explain and present the situations which took place last year in 2023 and which really and truly ignited my passion for topics related to UFOs and UAPs. As some of you may remember, February last year saw 4 shootdowns of the initially unknown objects over the North American airspace. On February the 4th, the United States Air Force shot down an object later described as a Chinese balloon, and confirmed to be just that by China afterwards over the state of South Carolina. This object was photographed a day earlier on 3rd February by a U-2 plane monitoring the American airspace, while the object itself had been monitored already since 28th January. China claimed that the object was a civilian balloon, and the entire situation resulted in a temporary increase of political tensions along the Washington-Beijing line. This event was not just one of its kind though. On 9 February, one of the American radars detected an unidentified flying object flying over the Alaskan airspace. In response, the NORAD, namely the North American Air Defense Command, sent an E-3 Sentry aircraft, the task of which was to track the detected object. This aircraft did 2 flybys around the identified objects on 9th and 10th February. F-35 and F-22 fighter jets were also sent airborne in order to carry out visual inspections of the object. The pilots of these planes reported that the object is unmanned, cylindrical in shape, and may pose danger to air traffic. Some of the pilots reported interruptions to their onboard systems caused by the object, while some were also unable to identify any means of propulsion of the object. The object itself kept moving at a speed of 20 to 40 miles an hour in the northward direction. On 10th February at 10:45 am local time, one of the F-22 fighters shot the object down, and this was followed by an attempted recovery. It still remains unclear whether the object was actually recovered, although the official information provided on 18th February claimed that the recovery effort had been abandoned. President Biden considered this mission a success and added that the object was most likely a private property used for recreational or research purposes. Another event took place over the Yukon province in Canada only a day later, on 11 February. NORAD, or the North American Joint American and Canadian Forces, monitored the object and sent F-22 fighters airborne supported by a tanker aircraft. The object was monitored over American airspace and then over the Canadian territory, where the following formation was joined by CF-18 and CP-140 planes. The object itself was described as a small metal balloon with an attached payload, moving at an altitude of almost 13 kilometers and posing threat to civilian air traffic. President Joe Biden and Prime Minister Justin Trudeau remained in touch and underlined the importance of finding the object once it is shot down, in order to determine its purpose and origin. The NORAD command ordered the object to be shot down, which it was on 11 February at 3:41 am local time. Canadian military and police, including the famous mounted Royal Police, tried to track the wreck going through approximately 3,000 square kilometers of mountainous and snow-covered ground. Some reports, which later appeared on the internet, spoke of significant US and Canadian forces moving on the ground in the area with attempts of making bookings at the local hotels for a 2-week period. The official version said that the search was called off on 17 February as a result of extremely difficult weather conditions and snowfall, as well as the snow cover on the ground. The series of strange objects appearing over North America was not over yet though. The same day, namely on 11 February 2023, an octagonal and otherwise unidentified flying object was identified over the northern part of Montana in the USA. This object was initially lost and then observed again the next day, already in Wisconsin, where it traveled over the upper Michigan Peninsula at an altitude of almost 22,000 feet. This object was also followed by the joint American and Canadian NORAD forces. A day later, on 12 February, the object was shot down by an F-16 aircraft as ordered by President Biden over Lake Huron. A search was undertaken also in this case, but it was inefficient and ended on 16 February with the conclusion that the object fell down into the waters of the lake. In this case, the object was shot down because it was moving close to military sites in the USA, and the pilots tracking the object observed strings or ropes hanging from the objects. According to the reports from the air, the object was unmanned and had no visible means of propulsion. It moved with the current wind. The official channels of information reported all the 4 conducted operations as successful. Nevertheless, the fact that in 3 of the 4 cases the search was called off and no photographic material was presented from any findings, as was the case with the Chinese balloon shot down in early February, raised numerous suspicions regarding both the nature and the origin of these objects. These suspicions and speculations of all sorts carry on to this day. Especially the object shot down over Canada is controversial because of its cylindrical shape, related to a different event we are going to mention a bit later in this video. UFO proponents and persons who tend not to believe the authorities considered the case to be suspicious and claimed that perhaps unidentified flying objects of exotic origin, that is, extraterrestrial objects, were shot down. Officially, however, peace and quiet followed the cases for a few months. The peace ended in early June when 2 very significant events took place. Personally, I was not there to see those events unfold in real time and only read about them several weeks later, but all the same, they definitely raised an eyebrow. On the 5th of June, the Debrief magazine published a paper by Leslie Kean and Ralph Blumenthal. Leslie is a journalist who has dealt with the UFO topic for a long time, as well as with other phenomena often considered to be paranormal in nature, with what soul is and what happens to us after physical death. Here I hope to present Leslie Kean and her achievements some other time. She's one of the persons behind the publication of some of the most profound and now commonly available videos presenting UFO craft as declassified by the American Department of Defense. This shocking and attention-drawing piece was already groundbreaking in its title. Obviously, it could be easily seen as an easy attempt to generate sensation, as the title claims. Intelligence officials say that the US has retrieved craft of non-human origin, or to put it more bluntly, of extraterrestrial origin. This article presented the person of the US military intelligence, David Grush, who was a whistleblower or a person disclosing classified information to the American Congress and to the intelligence community Inspector General. Information according to which the USA conducts secret programs involving the possession and recovery of extraterrestrial craft, some of which were retrieved intact and some partially intact, as he claimed. According to the information obtained from David Grush, this information was supposedly and unlawfully hidden away from the Congress, and he himself faced and experienced retaliation for the disclosure of classified information. Other representatives and officers of intelligence forces who knew about these programs independently confirmed these claims. David Grush himself was one of the people working for the Military Reconnaissance Office and was a part of an Unidentified Aerial Phenomena Task Force, or UAPTF, between 2019 and 2021. He was also later responsible for the analysis of UAP objects and presentation of related information to his team. This team was supposed to study UFOs, later dubbed UAPs, and was subordinate to the Navy and the Undersecretary of Defense, responsible for intelligence and security forces. Grush claimed that he received information according to which American military retrieved crashed, intact, and partially intact craft of unknown origin, both directly and through private contractors working for the American government, as well as by countries allied to the USA. An analysis of said objects supposedly indicated that they are likely extraterrestrial or otherwise exotic in origin and were not made by human hands, wherein the conclusions were based, for example, on material studies. Grush also claimed that these programs are covered by long-lasting secrecy, are strictly guarded, in particular by the US Air Force, the Department of Defense at large, which carried out discrediting and ridiculing campaigns aimed at unidentified flying objects and everything and everyone related to them. According to the information provided in the article, various countries comprising the so-called top of global powers were involved in the so-called unofficial Cold War, a race the subject of which was to retrieve the higher possible number of exotic craft and reverse engineering of the technology used in them. David Grush was legally represented by the former Intelligence Community Inspector General of the USA, Charles McCulloch III, whose involvement additionally added weight to the case. All the information presented in the article was officially approved by the DOPSR, a unit within the American Department of Defense, which approves all material, possibly confidential in nature, before it's published, and its task is to ensure that none of the published materials are disclosed unlawfully and break secrets comprising the national security of the USA. With such an approval granted in April 2023, The disclosure of this information itself was possible thanks to the Act of 2022 protecting whistleblowers by law against retribution, in cases in which such a disclosure was made in good faith, lawfully, and in order to protect the overall good. Grush's credibility was also confirmed by a retired Colonel Carl Nell, who cooperated with the military task force working on UAPs in 2021 and 2022, and according to whom David Grush is a professional beyond reproach. David Grush was also an exemplary military serviceman with over a decade of active service, including a mission in Afghanistan, as well as the fact that he prepared briefings on the presidential level presented in the White House. The presented information was also confirmed by one Christopher Mellon, who worked for nearly 20 years with the military intelligence of the USA and was a Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Military Intelligence. He also worked with the Congress in matters related to unidentified aerial phenomena. He was also contacted by many people providing information according to which the aforementioned programs actually exist and are shrouded in secrecy. The very existence of intelligent beings seemed to have been confirmed also by one Jonathan Gray, an intelligence officer of the USA with access to top-secret information, who worked at the National Air and Space Intelligence Center. For now, let's return to David Grush. He has spent a lot of time studying and analyzing cases related to purported wrecks and extraterrestrial or intelligently designed objects, recovered materials, and what may happen to them. Many current government employees and representatives of the military with direct contact with and participating in such programs have contacted him. On the 7th of April 2023, Grush himself resigned from his governmental post as he wished to provide all the acquired information to the public, at least as far as it was possible. The Intelligence Community Inspector General confirmed his concerns, information and doubt presented by Grush, claiming that they are urgent and justified. And if all those information presented by the generally very reliable and rational, down-to-earth people were not enough to stimulate the imagination, the proverbial fuel was poured onto the fire by Dr. Gary Nolan, an immunologist working at the Stanford University and a Nobel Prize candidate, who pointed out that our civilization experienced technological breakthroughs such as the invention of a transistor, for example. According to Gary, the studies on the purported and exotic materials could push our civilizations and technological development onto a completely new level. The research carried out by Gary Nolan himself is extremely interesting, and I will hopefully be also able to cover it in one of the future videos. This article, however, was not the only piece of media featuring David Grush. Almost simultaneously, also during the first decade of June, his interview with an Australian investigative journalist, Ross Coulthard, was published and featured in the American TV station called News Nation. I have provided a link to said interview below, and one day I am also hoping to provide a translation into Polish for my Polish viewers. In this interview, David Grush confirmed his words published in the debrief, but also provided additional information. According to said information, the objects of unidentified origin and controlled by intelligent design were recovered both from landing and crash sites, even earlier than the fairly well-known Roswell crash of 1947. The first such a situation which he was approved to talk about publicly and legally took place near the Italian town called Magenta in 1933, where the government of Benito Mussolini supposedly found and secured an acorn-shaped craft. He also stated that said craft was under the control of the Italian fascist government of the day, and the Vatican was also informed about the fact. And this situation lasted until the end of World War II, when the craft was reportedly taken over by the American military. All those events, however, were just a prelude to the key thing which took place on 26th of July 2023 and which I have already watched live myself. Before a special committee formed by members of the US Congress intended to study the unidentified aerial or anomalous phenomena, the so-called UAP caucus, 3 witnesses stood that day representing the USA military. Lieutenant Ryan Graves, a military pilot, David Grush, whom we already talked about, and Commander David Fravor, who had a personal experience with an unidentified flying object in 2004, During his active military service in an elite Union unit flying and using F-18 aircraft near the USS Nimitz aircraft carrier, an event I hope to talk about in more detail in the future. Those witnesses testified under oath, and if they lied to the Congress they could have and still can end up in jail. This meant that the issue was serious and that the stakes at play were high. When it comes to the pilots, both of them reported and described situations in which the object they themselves or their colleagues have encountered could not have been the work of human hands by any stretch of the imagination. Commander Fravor encountered the so-called tic-tac object, an object which was able to move at an unnatural speed, carry out maneuvers impossible for a standard aircraft, was reportedly able to disable some system aboard the US aircraft, and when it escaped at a tantalizing velocity, it reappeared on the radar 60 miles away, at the so-called cap point, the meeting point for pilots present airborne, which suggests that the object was somehow able to retrieve data from the US Navy aircraft patrolling the area. Lieutenant Graves pointed out that the object displaying anomalous behavior are observed on a daily basis by both military and civilian pilots, and in extremely high numbers. These observations are, however, seldom reported because the stigma attached to them causes the reports to be ridiculed and often end up in a career collapse for the pilots. Nevertheless, the objects are present in the airspace, and according to Graves, they pose a potential serious threat to both civilian and military aviation. He also mentioned the situation when an enormous object appeared over one of the American Air Force bases and was seen up close by the soldiers, some of whom even suffered injuries as a result of being that close to the object. The actual and proverbial bomb, however, was dropped during the hearing involving David Grush. He confirmed the aforementioned statements he provided to the press, but also added that the United States are in the possession of a double-digit or at least 10 craft of exotic origin, and that he is able to provide the relevant information regarding the location of said objects during a classified meeting in a so-called skiff, or a secure compartmentalized facility where the participants of classified meetings cannot enter with a phone, for example. The entire room is screened with a Faraday cage protecting against the potential attempted tapping and targeting attempts, and the entire room can even be vibrated in case there are attempts at tracking of what is being said inside using lasers from the outside, irradiating the premise. When the representative of South Carolina, Congresswoman Nancy Mace, asked David whether the crashed craft also came with biological samples or material of biological origin, he provided a positive answer to that particular question. The next and natural follow-up question from Ms. Mace touched on the origin of such material, whether it was human or non-human biologics. David Grush replied that according to the people who talked with him and who directly participated in secret military projects, some of the crash retrievals came with biologics originating from non-human beings.
You've stated that the government is in possession of potentially non-human spacecraft. Based on your experience and extensive conversations with experts, do you believe our government has made contact with intelligent extraterrestrials?
Something I can't discuss in public setting.
Okay, I can't ask when you think this occurred. If you believe we have crashed craft, stated earlier, do we have the bodies of the pilots who piloted this craft?
As I've stated publicly already in my News Nation interview, biologics came with some of these recoveries, yeah.
Were they, I guess, human or non-human biologics?
Non-human, and that was the assessment of people with direct knowledge on the program I talked to that are currently still on the program.
And was this documentary evidence, this video, photos, eyewitness? Like, how would that be determined?
The specific documentation I would have to talk to you in a skiff about.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Another person speaking during the event was Matt Gaetz, a Republican Party representative and a member of a defense committee providing a part of the oversight for which the Congress is responsible. He visited one of the military bases and exerted all of his powers and authorizations to talk with an air staff member, access to whom was almost prevented by the military. This person reported that he faced an unknown and unidentified flying object and presented the congressman with a picture of the aircraft made while in the air. According to Gates, who has seen military equipment on many occasions, the object presented in the picture could not have been made by human hands, either by the USA or any other country. The statement was further corroborated by David Fravor, according to whom none of the countries across the world could have the technology displayed by the Tic Tac object he faced in the air, both in 2004 and most likely also in 2023. In the video description you can find the original hearing recorded for posterity. It is worth watching, or at least listening to the entire thing, in my opinion. I remember it as clearly as if it was today when I watched this hearing at almost 1 a.m. at night. I experienced something that many people call their own ontological shock. Before the Congress of a global superpower, very serious people discussed matters related to the potentially most important discovery in the human history ever, at least since the time of Copernicus, perhaps since the wheel was invented, or pottery, or the alphabet. Of course, despite having testified under oath, despite the official permission from the Department of Defense and the military, there are always doubts lingering around. Have the witnesses really told the truth, especially in regard to the non-human craft and beings? On the other hand, how many people across the world, both in their professional duties and privately, report strange objects operating in the airspace all around the globe? We see people claiming they were abducted and were even on board such vehicles. Where is the truth, and are we really alone in the universe? Of course, the answer to these questions are never obvious, and I think we simply do not have them, or that such answers are fragmentary and incomplete at best. Nonetheless, the natural intrinsic human curiosity wanted me to study the topic ever deeper and deeper. I did not have to wait long for the events to unfold. If all of what we already talked about was not enough, already in May 2023 a document was put forward by the US Senators. Chuck Schumer, leader of the Democratic majority in the Senate, Marco Rubio, Mike Rounds, and Kirsten Gillibrand. It was related to the already present revelations regarding UFOs and UAPs, and the proposed amendment to the National Defense Authorization Act of 2024 included statements obvious to people following these topics, but shocking and at least raising the politician eyebrows. This document, a link to which you can find in the video description, clearly and explicitly refers to potential non-human intelligence, to exotic vehicles and materials of unknown, implicitly also extraterrestrial origin, recovered by secret programs sponsored by the US military and private contractors working for the American Armed Forces. In addition to such statements, these documents also proposed a disclosure of all documentation related to such phenomena and objects after the relevant period of time, including the information which cannot be declassified on strict national security grounds, as well as the formation of a special unit, a library collecting such information and making it accessible to the public. Of key importance, however, were the stipulations regarding eminent domain, according to which private companies in possession of materials of exotic origin would be forced not only to disclose the possession of such materials, but also to return them to the US government if it asked for it. Since political lobbying is a strong theme in the USA politics, this particular amendment was suspected to be lobbied against, and both the legislative chambers were against its full version, and many of its key stipulations were eventually cut from the text. This meant that the dream of full and almost unconditional and total disclosure of the truth regarding the UAPs had to be shelved for later. The act and the amendment itself passed, however, and were signed by President Biden into the law, and some of its elements, including said library, were approved and were to become reality. There are rumors floating around that another attempt with an amendment, including stipulations present in the original version of 2023, will be made the next time the NDAA Act goes through the legislative again. Only time will tell if this is the case. Notwithstanding the aforementioned partial defeat, the fact that such serious politicians, including members of the so-called Gang of Eight, namely the most powerful members of both the legislative chambers in the USA, openly considered the possibility and discussed non-human intelligent life, exotic materials of unknown origin, and treated the case seriously, was also extremely important. It was one of the key elements which led to the departure from the stigma following people interested in the UFO topics and mentioning them in media, which resulted in an increased interest in the subject matter and its further spread. I hope I was able to present you even a small fraction of the mystery shrouding the UFOs, UAPs, and similar topics. Perhaps you now ask yourself the same questions I have and still am asking myself. All remarks, comments, and thoughts are most welcome, of course, and I will try to do my best to reply to any and all comments you may have. Likes and subscriptions are also very welcome, and I am forever grateful for those, as they will help us promote the channel with the YouTube algorithm. In the next video, I hope to present perhaps the best and most well-known event which triggered the entire UFO craze across the world, the Roswell crash of 1947 and other events from the same year. Next, I would like to present the claims by David Grush in more detail, as well as the July hearing I have mentioned in today's video. Until the next time, take care and see you soon.